Welcome to the deep dive. So today we have a really interesting case that someone sent in for us to dive into.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one.
It is. And it's all about a pretty big legal battle that ended up in the High Court.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
High Court, okay.
Yeah, it's Balfour Beatty Construction Ltd versus the London Borough of Lambeth from 2002.
Okay, I'm ready.
You're ready. All right. So this case is fascinating. It all revolves around the refurbishment of, get this, Falmouth House in London.
Okay, Falmouth House. I've got it.
Falmouth House, yeah. Now, this case, it really shines a light on what happens when you have delays in a construction project and how the legal system tries to sort out all the mess.
Okay, yeah, delays are just a nightmare in construction. I'm sure everyone listening knows what that's like.
Yeah. So think of this deep dive as a real-world lesson, in project management, contracts, and how to handle disputes when things go sideways.
I like it.
So, to give you some context, the original contract for this Falmouth House refurbishment was for a pretty hefty sum, $3,847,231.
Wow, that's a lot of pounds.
It is, right. And they were using the standard JCT form of building contract.
Okay, the JCT.
Yeah, JCT. So the heart of this whole disagreement was Lambeth's decision to hold back a big chunk of money. $355,831.71 to be exact.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they claimed this was for damages because of delays caused by Balfour Beatty. And Balfour Beatty, they weren't too happy about that.
I imagine not.
They argued they actually deserved even more time to finish the project because of all these, get this, relevant events.
Relevant events. Okay.
Relevant events, yeah.
So for our listener who maybe hasn't dealt with construction contracts too much, can you explain what a relevant event is?
Yeah, good point. So relevant events are basically, those things that can happen on a project that cause delays. But the contractor, in this case Balfour Beatty, isn't necessarily totally responsible for them.
Right, I see.
Things like maybe the client changes their mind about what they want, variations,
right.
Or the client themselves causes some holdup.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So I guess the big question here is why this whole disagreement over delays and damages blew up to the point where they ended up in the Technology and Construction Court. And what did the judge actually decide in the end?
Exactly. So let's roll back the clock and look at how this project actually unfolded. Work kicked off around November 1st, 1999, with a planned completion date.
Okay, so November 1999.
November 1999. And then Balfour Beatty starts raising flags. They say they've hit all these snags, these relevant events that are throwing them off schedule. Around 31 of them, they claimed.
31, wow. That's a lot.
It's a lot, right. And they start formally letting Lambeth know about these issues through letters, starting around May 5, 2000.
Okay, so they were keeping Lambeth informed. At least they were doing that right.
Well, yeah, at least on paper it seems so.
Right.
But even with all these notices, things didn't go smoothly.
I bet. So what happened next?
Well, the project architect, they did acknowledge some of these relevant events, and they did grant some extensions of time. This pushed the new completion date to October 23, 2000.
Okay, so they got some extra time.
They got some breathing room, yeah. But the story, as they say, doesn't end there.
I figured. What else happened?
Well, even with those extensions, the project kept falling behind. Certificates of non-completion were issued in September 2000 and again in January 2001.
So they were still missing deadlines left and right.
Yeah. The project was dragging on, and practical completion finally happened on May 24, 2001.
Okay, so way past the original and even the revised completion date.
Way past. So Balfour Beatty was pretty adamant that they were owed more time, and they wanted that deducted money back, that £355,000 plus.
Makes sense, I guess. They must have felt pretty hard done by.
Yeah, so to bolster their case, they put together this big, detailed analysis called the Overall Review Analysis of its As-Built program.
Overall Review Analysis of its As-Built program. Okay.
Yeah, a mouthful, right. They submitted this in July 2001.
Okay, so they're trying to really lay out why they deserve that money back.
Exactly. But this is where Lambeth really starts pushing back hard.
Oh, I bet.
Their main argument was that Balfour Beatty messed up big time by not keeping good records.
Oh, bad record keeping. That's a classic.
Classic, right. They basically said Balfour Beatty didn't stick to a crucial part of their contract, Clause 250 to be exact.
Okay. And what did that clause say?
This clause, it obligated Balfour Beatty to keep proper track of the project's progress, maintain a proper site program. And on top of that, Lambeth said Balfour Beatty didn't even try to come up with ways to make up for lost time.
So basically, not only did they not keep good track of things, they didn't even try to fix the problems they were creating.
Yeah, that's basically Lambeth's argument. If you can't clearly show how the project was moving along or not moving along, it becomes really tough to argue about what actually caused the delays and how bad they really were.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You can't just say, oh, we were delayed without any proof.
Exactly. Lambeth was essentially saying, look, you haven't got the proof. You didn't keep good records, so we don't believe you. They called Balfour Beatty's claims mere speculation.
Oof, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, it's not a good look for Balfour Beatty at this point.
No, not at all.
And Lambeth went even further. They criticized how Balfour Beatty presented their final as-built programs, the records of what actually happened.
Okay.
They said these programs only showed progress floor by floor.
Floor by floor.
Yeah, not detailed enough, according to Lambeth. They argued that you couldn't see the real impact of individual events.
Right, like some areas of a floor might be delayed, but others might be on track.
Exactly. And Balfour Beatty's way of reporting just didn't capture that.
I see. So they were too broad, not granular enough.
Granular, that's the word. And this is a key insight, right? In these big, complex projects, the level of detail in your record keeping, it can actually make or break your case legally.
Really, really important.
Huge, huge. And it gets even more technical. Lambeth also pointed out that Balfour Beatty, in both their planned schedule and in the as-built records, they never even identified the critical path.
The critical path, right? That's the sequence of tasks that absolutely have to stay on track for the whole project to finish on time.
Exactly. Any delay on that critical path, it's going to directly push back the entire project.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. It's like having all these ingredients for a cake but no recipe.
Right. You know what you need, but you don't know the order to put it all together.
Perfect analogy. And Lambeth, they were on a roll. They brought up all these established ways of analyzing delays in construction. Things like time impact analysis, window analysis, collapsed as built analysis, impacted plan analysis, all these methods.
They did their homework.
They really did. And their point was Balfour Beatty's approach didn't match any of these accepted methods.
Okay.
They said it was just a global assessment, a big picture view, not a detailed analysis. And that's not good enough when you're trying to figure out the true impact of delays.
I see. So Lambeth is saying poor record keeping, bad analysis, basically your claims are weak.
Basically, yeah. So Balfour Beatty, at this point, they're facing a lot of pushback.
So what do? I'm guessing they didn't just give up.
Oh, no, they didn't give up. They decided to take things up a notch.
Okay, here we go.
On December 5, 2001, they initiated adjudication.
Adjudication.
Yeah. And their goal was specifically to get that deducted money back.
All right, so what is adjudication exactly?
Adjudication is a way to resolve disputes quickly. It's pretty common in construction in the UK.
Okay, sort of like a fast track to a decision.
Exactly, yeah, fast track. And to get this adjudication going, they brought in David Richards to be the adjudicator.
Okay, David Richards, the adjudicator.
Right. So Balfour Beatty, Lambeth, and the adjudicator, they all agree on how this process is going to work, the rules, the fees, all that.
Okay.
They call it the adjudication agreement.
Right. Makes sense.
And they use Clause 41A of the JCT conditions as the standard procedure.
So they have a framework to work within. Got it.
So the adjudicator, he asks Balfour Beatty to provide a really detailed schedule of all those relative events they claim caused delays, with specific links to their evidence.
Sounds reasonable.
Right. They had a meeting on December 20, 2001, and this meeting, it didn't go so well for Balfour Beatty.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, according to the court documents, Balfour Beatty, they couldn't even point out the critical path on their project plans.
Oh, isn't that good?
Not good, right. Remember Lambeth's point about no critical path?
Yeah.
Well, it comes back to bite them.
I bet.
The adjudicator even described their plans as merely drawn bars without any links. Like they were just lines on paper, no connections.
So it was basically that cake analogy again. They had the ingredients, but no recipe.
Exactly. They couldn't show how the delays actually impacted the overall timeline.
Oof, that's a problem.
Big problem. After that, the adjudicator asked for more detailed records to back up the actual progress for specific weeks. But Balfour Beatty, they couldn't fully provide this, especially for the mechanical and electrical work.
So again, the lack of detailed records is hurting them.
Yeah. It's a recurring theme. It got so bad that the adjudicator even said he might need help to properly understand Balfour Beatty's program.
Wow, so he's basically saying, this is so messy, I can't make sense of it on my own.
Pretty much. And while all this is going on, Lambeth, they submitted their responses to Balfour Beatty's claims.
Okay, so both sides are presenting their arguments.
Yeah, but the timing of these submissions later became a bit of an issue. Some people felt Lambeth's arguments were submitted too close to when the adjudicator was supposed to make his decision.
Oh, I see. So not enough time for Balfour Beatty to really respond.
Right, which highlights the whole issue of tight timelines in adjudication.
It's fast-tracked, but maybe sometimes a bit too fast.
Maybe, yeah.
Interesting. So what did the adjudicator decide in the end? Did he rule in favor of Balfour Beatty despite all these problems with their documentation?
Well, that's the thing. Despite all that, the adjudicator did rule in favor of Balfour Beatty.
Really?
Yeah, he said Balfour Beatty was entitled to a big extension of time, 35 weeks and 1 day.
35 weeks. That's a huge extension.
It's massive, right? It pushed the new completion date all the way to April 10th, 2001.
Wow, so the goalposts have completely shifted now.
Totally. And this meant that the period Lambeth could claim damages for shrunk dramatically, from 30 weeks and 3 days down to only 6 weeks and 2 days.
Okay, so because of this extension, Lambeth can't claim nearly as much as they originally wanted.
Exactly.
So that's a big win for Balfour Beatty.
Huge win. And as a direct result, the adjudicator said Lambeth had to pay back a lot of money, $283,997.14 plus interest.
Wow, yeah, that's a serious chunk of change.
It is, right. And he also said Lambeth had to pay for the whole adjudication process.
So Balfour Beatty comes out on top, at least for now.
Yeah, but the judgment itself does mention that the adjudicator had a tough time linking the relevant events to specific delays on Balfour Beatty's programs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So even though he ruled in their favor, he acknowledged that their documentation wasn't great.
Yeah, he had to get a bit creative to reach his decision.
How so?
He used a method called, and I'm going to try to say this right, a collapsed as built method, or something like that.
Collapse is built, okay.
Basically, he tried to work backward and figure out how the delays actually happened.
I see. So he's trying to reconstruct the events, even though the records are poor.
Yeah, sort of like a detective piecing together clues. He focused on 2 main areas of the project, the flats and the concierge area.
Okay.
For the flats, he decided the critical path was stripping out, then brickwork, blockwork, windows, or dry lining, then minaret boarding, and finally decorating. The decorating was actually delayed by a flood in December 2000.
Okay, so he's actually pinpointing specific tasks and events.
Yeah, trying to. And for the concierge area, the critical path was concrete work, then brickwork, blockwork, plastering, windows, carpentry, and then all the mechanical and electrical stuff, like CCTV.
Okay, so he's basically creating that critical path analysis that Lambeth said was missing.
Exactly. He's filling in the blanks. And what's interesting is that he said this 35-week extension wasn't because of normal weather or water damage, except for that flood in the flats.
Okay.
He mainly blamed changes to the work, late instructions from Lambeth, things like that.
So the 35 weeks is mostly down to Lambeth's actions, according to him.
That's how he saw it.
Interesting. So despite all the mess with the records, the adjudicator found a way to give Balfour Beatty a pretty big win. But I'm guessing this isn't the end of the story, is it?
You guessed right. Lambeth wasn't happy.
I bet they weren't.
They weren't giving up that easily. They decided to take the fight to the High Court.
Oh, wow. So now we're in the big leagues.
Big leagues, yeah. This is where it gets really interesting from a legal standpoint.
I'm all ears.
So Lambeth challenged the adjudicator's decision on 2 main points.
Okay, 2 main points.
One was all about impartiality and natural justice.
Impartiality and natural justice, okay.
Yeah. Basically, they said the adjudicator wasn't fair to them.
Okay, how so?
Well, they said he didn't give them a real chance to respond to his methods.
Oh, okay.
Especially the way he came up with this critical path analysis. Remember, neither Balfour Beatty nor Lambeth actually presented a critical path analysis themselves.
Yeah.
So Lambeth argued the adjudicator basically did Balfour Beatty's work for them by creating this analysis without asking for their input.
Interesting.
And they cited some legal cases that emphasize how important it is to be fair, to make sure both sides have a chance to talk about important points or methods that weren't part of the original arguments.
Right, so everyone gets a chance to be heard. That makes sense.
Yeah. And the judge, Humphrey Lloyd QC, He was really paying attention to these arguments. He brought up previous cases that really highlight how important it is for a tribunal, like an adjudicator, to let both sides respond to any arguments or analysis that weren't originally presented.
Right, you can't just spring a new argument on someone at the last minute.
Exactly. Lambeth was saying, look, he built this case for Balfour Beatty and didn't even give us a chance to challenge it.
So they felt like they were blindsided.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm following. What was Lambeth's second big argument against the adjudicator's decision?
So their second point was about a breach of contract and whether the adjudicator overstepped his boundaries.
Oh, okay.
This was all about the adjudicator using assistants.
Assistants.
Yeah. Lambeth said he used these assistants for more than just figuring out facts.
Okay.
They claimed the assistants were involved in making the as-built chart, maybe even in creating that critical path analysis. And Lambeth argued that wasn't allowed according to the adjudication agreement.
So they were saying he brought in extra help to do things he wasn't supposed to.
Exactly.
Okay, so the judge had to decide if that was fair or not.
Yeah, tough call. He did acknowledge that adjudicators have some freedom to set their own procedures and figure out the facts of the case.
Right, they need some leeway to do their job.
Right. But he also said that being fair is super important, and both sides need a chance to comment on important parts of the decision-making, especially when new methods are introduced.
Okay, so a balance between freedom and fairness.
Exactly.
Got it. And what did the judge ultimately decide?
Well, on the first point, the impartiality thing, he sided with Lambeth.
Oh, wow.
He agreed that by creating this critical path analysis without letting either side comment, the adjudicator might have broken the rules of natural justice and impartiality. He said Lambeth had a good argument that they weren't given a fair chance to respond to a key part of his reasoning.
So even though adjudication is supposed to be quick, fairness still matters the most.
Huge takeaway.
Huge takeaway, exactly.
And what about the second point, the assistants?
Yeah, what about that?
The judge did agree that using them in that way might have technically been a breach of the agreement, but he didn't think it really changed the outcome or hurt Lambeth too much.
So it was a minor misstep, but not a deal breaker.
Exactly. In the end, the High Court dismissed Balfour Beatty's attempt to enforce the adjudicator's decision. The judge said Lambeth had a realistic prospect of success in arguing that the adjudicator wasn't impartial and didn't follow the rules of natural justice.
Okay, so back to square one, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what's the big lesson here for our listener? What should they take away from this whole saga?
The big takeaway is that even though adjudication is designed to be quick and efficient, being fair is absolutely crucial. The High Court wouldn't uphold a decision where one side wasn't given a proper chance to understand and challenge the reasoning and methods used by the adjudicator. This case really shows that speed can't come at the cost of fairness in legal proceedings.
I think it also highlights the tension that exists between giving adjudicators the power to investigate and make decisions quickly, while also making sure both parties in a dispute have the right to know how the decision was made and have the opportunity to respond. In this case, the judge felt that the adjudicator went too far by essentially building a big part of Balfour Beatty's case for them, without giving Lambeth a chance to push back. And it's fascinating how something as seemingly technical as a missing critical path in project documents became central to this bigger issue of fairness in the legal process.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what if the adjudicator had talked to both Balfour Beatty and Lambeth about his plan to create a critical path analysis before he actually did it? Could that have changed things? This case really gets you thinking about how important it is to balance efficiency and due process, especially when you're dealing with complex technical disagreements. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of important questions about how we handle these kinds of disputes. It makes you wonder, what's the best way to ensure that both sides feel like they've been heard and that the process is fair, even when you need to make a decision quickly? There's no easy answer. But this case definitely gives us a lot to think about.
Absolutely. It's food for thought for anyone involved in these types of projects.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you found it insightful.
Yeah, this was a good one. Thanks for having me.
Until next time.
See you then.